Hey guys, Khadroth here. So JP just got the new Noah event, and in the process we also got some new upgrades. We're going to be talking about the upgrade that both Cersei and Nemo got here in a minute, but just as a favor to me, if you guys enjoy these analysis videos, make sure you like and subscribe. That way you guys get notified the second a new video comes out. I produce these on a weekly basis at this point, so feel free to check it out. We try to post almost every single day new content for you guys, so I would definitely appreciate it. And again, it does help us. So, all right, starting off right off the rip here, we have the Cersei buff. Cersei is definitely an interesting unit. She has long since been a very solid 4-star single target caster. She's buster based, and she has the ability to pigify. The devs have come in and they've actually upgraded her third skill. Part of the reason for this is because not only does she tie in with the event, but she also is kind of feeling a little bit of pressure on the backside. That is to say, the recent buff to Medea has actually kind of put some of the 4-star single target casters in a bad spot. I was actually just ranting about this before recording this video, as they did remember that Sheba also existed, as they gave her a craft essence for the event. So we'll have to see, maybe she'll get an upgrade when the Grand Caster duel rolls around in a couple of months. But at least as of right now, Midrash is just kind of in a bad spot and is pretty much just trounced by Medea. Cersei, however, still kind of held her own. She was still at least kind of slightly edging out Medea in terms of damage, but still had some of the utility to make her worthwhile. That being said, Medea is an arts unit, so she could kind of just sit there doing it over and over again, and that definitely didn't help Cersei. So the devs basically came in and they took her advice for sailing, basically kind of her more like pedestrian skill here, that just had critical star regeneration and the ability to remove the party's debuffs, and they upgrade it, now giving steroids to the entire party. So this not only is going to help out Cersei's damage output, this is also going to help her in a composition with other units. This is a really, really nice upgrade for her. She is basically going to get 15% arts and buster up for the entire party for 3 turns, and increase the party's NP damage for 3 turns by an additional 15% on top of the already existing aspects to this skill that she had. So this is a really, really nice one, as I mentioned before. Basically, on the screen now, you guys can see Cersei's self-damage numbers here. This is just her in a neutral environment under her own power with no sort of external buffs like from a support or a mystic code or anything like that. So with regards to that, you can see it is just a fairly sizable bump up. Actually, ironically enough, this upgrade is better than just straight up giving her an NP interlude in that regard, as NP2 is not as much as the new NP1 is. So that is kind of what we normally look for, as when you get an NP interlude, it usually means NP2 becomes the new NP1. So because that 36k number is not as strong as the new 38k number that she has, it means that for her, this is actually a little bit better than a standard NP interlude would be. So that is definitely nice. It's definitely going to help out Cersei's damage capacity. And on screen now, you guys can see the actual numbers for both old Cersei and new Cersei in terms of an optimal 3-turn setup. Now, obviously it's a single target caster and she is buster, so trying to 3-turn with her, I'm not going to say you can't do it, but it's not a very common thing. But just for comparative sake and kind of showing damage output capability, you guys can see basically her old NP1 wave 3 number would have ended up being about 440k. This is with all the buffs rolling in, and her just kind of utilizing a double Oberon scenario in order to make this work. Now, however, since we have something like a pin number 5 to help her out, we can actually operate in a double Koyanskaya setup, making things a little bit more fluid and normal for her. And we also have the Black Grail and Oberon still to boot. So now we can hit about 493k for her. This is definitely a much better environment, on top of having doubled up man power mods being potentially there. So a much more improved number for Cersei. Comparing basically single target one-shot damage, if you will. So this would be like kind of like in a raid environment or some other scenario in which you just need the one turn of damage output. How much can you amplify? How much can you get out of it? Basically, the two comps stay the exact same in this scenario, but you can see just the sheer damage increase numbers, as it was almost as much as the 50% power mod that Koyenskaya was providing in the old numbers is now about as strong as no power modifier added at NP1 with the new numbers. So definitely a lot better. These are still neutral, by the way, but they do include obviously the support buffs and everything like that. So that means if you're up against an effective target, you're going to be able to basically double these numbers. So it is a really interesting thing to see just how strong of a buff this is, even though maybe on paper it doesn't look like it's a huge deal. Now, comparing to someone like Ilya, you can actually see basically Cersei's, 3-turn environment numbers are actually quite a bit better. In terms of one-shot numbers, though, we are looking at Ilya still kind of having the edge. But that's kind of to be expected. It is a 5-star, and there is, again, kind of going to be a little bit of favoritism on that end in terms of the scaling. Still, it is at least nice to see that Cersei, even at NP1, is still fairly competitive, and certainly if you have multiple MP levels, you can make Cersei deal a whole lot more. Sanzang, absolutely going to trounce her on one-shot damage there, but numbers are at least a little bit worse in a 3-turn setup in that sort of scenario if you would actually use them for that. So that is at least an interesting thing to denote, that Sanzang basically still is kind of cursed to use a double Oberon sort of setup for a 3-turn to work properly. Okuni is another interesting one, as she will also do a lot more in terms of one-shot damage numbers, but her 3-turn numbers are at least a little bit more concerning as well, though Okuni does at least have the anti-demonic niche to kind of help her out in that end. So there could be environments where she will just kind of excel and be a better option regardless. So I think Okuni's still in a pretty good spot. And then Summer Charlotte is, interestingly enough, extremely poor and wholly worse than Cersei if she does not have her super effective modifier for skill ceiling being active. If she does, however, she basically just wins against Cersei, making her a little bit more of a more fluid option potentially, and somebody that at least can just really pump the damage numbers. So the issue then would be the utility that Cersei brings potentially being better as a comparison against Summer Charlotte. But I do think, again, this is a really good buff for Cersei. I think it really makes her a lot more viable as a single target option for you guys, as not that she was in a bad spot before, but at least due to the Medea buff, you were seeing a little bit of issue of like, well, why do I use the 4 stars when there's a 3-star that is doing good numbers now? So again, this does really help her out, and I think it's a good spot for her to be in. Next up, Nemo actually got his first upgrade, and that might sound kind of absurd because, as you guys know, we just got Noah into the game. I'll be covering him in another video, but Nemo has always been a little bit of a weird one. He is a single target permanent rider that is arts, and that has made a lot of people either ignore him or at least choose to say, hey, if he spooks me, I'll take him, but I'm not going to necessarily try. Still, there are plenty of people that really like Nemo and have rolled him, but he hasn't really gotten a whole lot of love over time, and they probably needed to, because let's be honest, for a long period in time, Ozzy has just kind of been dominating the single target riders, and it's mostly just due to the fact that Ozzy has gotten by far the most love, short of someone like, say, Ushi Wakamaru. So it is a really weird thing to see that, like, the riders, especially the single target ones, are relatively untouched, and that's something that I hope the devs are maybe now noticing and going to do something about. But in this case, they actually did do something with OG Nemo here, as they come in and they buff his Voyager of the Storm skill. We have seen a little bit of adjustments to Voyager of the Storm skills over time. I'm not going to say it's a super common thing, but it is nice to see them tweaking some of these, because while Voyager of the Storm can be a strong ability in the right circumstances, it definitely struggles with its single turn duration in most cases. Now, Nemo had his own unique variant on this that basically applied to waterside and void space battlefields, but I feel like the devs kind of looked at this and said, you know what, this is lackluster, let's give him a little bit more staying power. So now they have changed his party-wide NP damage basically to be 3 turns, same thing with his party-wide attack. And as you guys can see, if we look back here, they've also rounded out the numbers. So instead of it being 12% at max for both the NP damage and the attack up, it is now a solid 15%. So you basically end up getting a little bit more modifiers out of this, about 6% more in terms of that. And that will impact damage. It's not going to be a huge buff, but it will at least be something. On top of this, they also added a new utility to make Nemo a little bit more useful and stand out from the pack, where now he also increases the party's buff removal resistance for 1 time over 3 turns. I actually really like this change, as this is another unit like, again, Benny Enma that can provide buff removal resistance, but is also single target, which is good for boss killing scenarios, which, let's be honest, is the majority of scenarios that you're going to encounter buff removal in. So I've always found it weird when they slap buff removal resistance on a lot of AoE units, because single targets seem to be the better option in most of those cases. But it just remains to be seen as to what battle you are facing and what circumstances you're up against. Still, I really like this. It is a 100% buff removal resist, and it is party-wide, so that has a whole lot of utility, and that will see Nemo getting a little bit more use over time. How is that going to translate into numbers? Let's take a look. Now on screen, you guys can see Nemo's raw self-damage only numbers here. This does not include any sort of buffs from anything external, including mystic codes, support units, or anything else. Just Nemo with his own buffs under his own power. So you guys can see on the left side, basically, we have the normal numbers for Nemo. He certainly is not somebody that's like dealing, you know, crap amounts of damage, but he does at least have a little bit of a, like, I'm gonna say, pedestrian number to it. Nemo has always been single target arts. That's always been a feather in his cap, because it allows him to just kind of sit there and keep doing it over and over again. The upside, though, to these pedestrian numbers is going to be that they have at least given you 2 very, I'm going to say, usable niches, both as Supergiant and Waterside Battlefield can be fairly common things, depending on what you are fighting. Plus, the ability to combine both means that Nemo's damage can scale actually pretty absurdly in the right circumstances. So in that regard, buffing his damage, I can see why the devs maybe said, hey, let's give him a little bit of buff and see where things go from there. It also may be the case that they may be thinking that somewhere down the line they might give him an NP interlude, or they might end up buffing another one of his skills, maybe with a higher steroid to it. So I can see why they maybe didn't want to like go all out with something like Voyager of the Storm. Plus, the fact that it's 3-turn duration now just really helps out for his sustainability in terms of damage output, and making him less of a like 1-turn, 1-trick pony here. So in that regard, don't expect a huge fluctuation. You can see the damage variance is quite minimal, but I do think in terms of usability, this buff is actually really good. So on screen, you guys can see old Nemo's 3-turn numbers and 1-shot numbers. And now here is Nemo's new numbers. So basically he goes from 321 on wave 3 in a proper comp to about 333k now instead. So a little bit of like, I'm going to say like about a 12k damage gain there in a proper composition. For single target numbers, you're looking at 469, nice, going all the way up to 484. So you do get at least a little bit of a jump there, and then obviously even more when it comes to things like his power mods. So I do think, again, Nemo is an intriguing case. Let's take a look at how he stands currently amongst all the riders. So we have Sakamoto Ryoma Rider, who is a single target welfare. Obviously, in terms of something like that, he, ironically enough, ends up beating Nemo out of niche. In niche, Nemo just wins outright. For single target damage, though, Ryoma actually, again, pretty much a whole head above him in terms of strength, unless that niche is in play. Then you're going to see a little bit better effectiveness for Nemo. Summer Murasaki is another interesting one. She's also a single target arts looper. Not very much in the way of charge, but once you get her looping, she just kind of keeps going. And this is reflected in her damage output. As you guys can see, she is a lot better of an option in terms of just raw damage, and she does have the super effective earth modifier. This means that she can stand decently toe-to-toe with Nemo even after his buff, but it really just depends. She's a limited summer unit. Maybe not everybody has access to her, has her at higher NP levels, so it is what it is. But I do think she's a decent option, albeit somebody that doesn't necessarily have the same charge that Nemo does. Kentucky Rider, also a welfare from the Evocation Festival. You guys can get him now. He's absolutely fantastic. He is single target quick. So assuming you have the proper quick supports for him, he is going to pop off. And this is reflected again in damage numbers. He doesn't have any sort of niche, but in terms of just raw output, well, Kentucky's always kind of been a pretty insane one. And then we have Cinderella, who is also another welfare that will pretty much just stand toe-to-toe with Nemo, particularly if her wild beast niche is in play. From there, we also have Kets. Kets, in my opinion, is in dire need of an upgrade. They did give her one buff back in the day that helped her out, but she was kind of neck and neck with Ozzy. They both got an initial buff, and they were both still neck and neck. And then Ozzy got that super nice NP interlude that Kets just never got. So, to me, Kets could absolutely use an NP interlude. She feels like an almost forgotten unit at this point, and I'd really like to see the devs give her some kind of love. And then here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Ozzy, just kind of rolling in here like a freight train with 670k damage on wave 3 and 687k on terms of one-shot damage. So not a huge improvement there, but that just kind of is a testament to Ozzy's just raw firepower in terms of what he can accomplish. He doesn't really have any niches, so to speak, but we all know Ozzy has a ton of utility packed into his kit, so utilizing him in a 3-turn comp, you know, as a single target, probably not going to happen too often, but obviously there are multiple damage dealer setups and things where you can use him alongside somebody else that's maybe going to take out a wave for him. Ozzy's going to be kind of the better option for things like that and really help things out, but Nemo does kind of stand apart a little bit now due to this upgrade giving the party 3-turn duration buffs. This is going to help out his usability. This will improve the scenarios that you can actually kind of take him in and make him a better performer in scenarios that you would already take him in. In that regard, I think it's a good buff for Nemo. I would have maybe liked to see a little bit more damage, but like I said, that may be coming somewhere down the line in the future. Though admittedly, it is year 10 of the game, so who knows when a buff like that will happen. Let me know what you guys think about the Cersei and Nemo buffs, and do you think that they maybe should have gone a little bit further, or would you have maybe preferred to see a different unit get buffed? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next video. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one. Chat, is he Noah or is he no? Ah.